I let my ex give a toast at my wedding. His furious response caught me completely off guard. Hi Reddit, I'm Jessica, and this is my first time posting here. I'm completely devastated and don't know where else to turn for advice after what happened at my wedding 3 weeks ago. My life has imploded in ways I never thought possible, and I'm still trying to make sense of it all. James and I dated for 4 years in college and for 2 years after. We were that couple everyone thought would get married, the high school sweethearts who made it work through college and beyond. He was sweet, dependable, and completely devoted to me. The kind of guy who remembered every anniversary, who would bring me soup when I was sick, who planned his life around our future together. For a long time, I thought that was what I wanted. The problem was, after 6 years together, that devotion started to feel suffocating. Our relationship had become so comfortable that it felt stagnant. There was no excitement, no spark, just this overwhelming sense that we were settling into a routine that would define the rest of our lives. I started to panic at the thought of waking up next to the same person, doing the same things, having the same conversations for the next 50 years. I didn't break up with James right away. Instead, I started pulling away emotionally, picking fights over nothing, criticizing him for being too predictable and boring. I'd roll my eyes when he'd plan another thoughtful date night at our favorite restaurant. I'd sigh heavily when he'd suggest watching a movie we both loved. I'd find fault with his clothes, his friends, his career ambitions, anything to create distance between us. Looking back, I was cruel in ways I never thought I could be. I was trying to make him end things so I wouldn't have to be the bad guy. I wanted him to get angry, to fight back, to give me a reason to walk away with my conscience intact. But James, with his endless patience, just tried harder. He planned surprise dates, bought thoughtful gifts, and kept trying to reignite something I had already decided was dead. His persistence only made me resent him more. Then I met Ethan at a work conference in Boston. My marketing firm had sent me to represent our team, and Ethan was there with a competing agency. We were seated at the same table during a networking lunch, and the connection was immediate. He was everything James wasn't, spontaneous, ambitious, with an edge of danger that made my heart race. Where James was steady and reliable, Ethan was unpredictable and exciting. Where James was content with our comfortable life, Ethan had stories about backpacking through Europe, skydiving in New Zealand, and building a career that constantly challenged him. The attraction was immediate and intense. We exchanged numbers for professional reasons, but within a week we were texting constantly about everything but work. 2 weeks later, we met for drinks when he was in town for business, and I crossed a line I'd always sworn I never would. I told James I was working late, but instead I was in a hotel room with Ethan, feeling more alive than I had in years. The affair lasted 3 months before I finally ended things with James. Those 3 months were a blur of lies, late nights at the office that were actually spent with Ethan, business trips that were extended so we could have an extra day together, texts I'd delete before coming home to James. I became someone I didn't recognize, someone who could lie without flinching, who could come home and kiss James goodnight with the taste of another man still on my lips. I didn't tell James about Ethan when I ended our relationship. I just said I needed space, that I'd outgrown our relationship, that I wanted different things. I used every cliche in the book, and each one felt hollow as I spoke it. He looked so broken when I said those words, sitting on our couch with his hands clasped tightly between his knees. But he didn't fight me. He just nodded, packed his things from our apartment over the next day, and left with a quiet, "I hope you find what you're looking for." The lack of resistance only confirmed what I'd been telling myself, that he was too weak, too accepting, and that I deserved someone who would fight for me. Someone like Ethan, who pursued what he wanted with an intensity that thrilled me. Ethan and I moved in together a month later, into a sleek downtown loft that cost 3 times what my old place with James had. The passion was electric, our connection intense. Everything felt heightened. The arguments were fiercer, the makeups more dramatic, the day-to-day less predictable. We got engaged after just 1 year, when Ethan proposed during a spontaneous weekend trip to Vegas. It wasn't the careful, thoughtful proposal James would have planned, but it was exciting and impulsive, just like our relationship. I was convinced I'd made the right choice. My life with Ethan was everything I thought I wanted. The wedding planning went smoothly until about 2 months before the big day. My parents were footing most of the bill for what had become an increasingly elaborate affair. Ethan had expensive taste, and I was eager to prove that my new life was better, more glamorous than what I'd had with James. We'd chosen a historic mansion overlooking the harbor, hired a renowned chef to cater, and invited over 200 guests. It was going to be the kind of wedding that people talked about for years. Ethan and I were at dinner, discussing the final guest list, when he made a suggestion that caught me completely off guard. "I think we should invite James to the wedding," he said casually, sipping his bourbon as if he'd suggested inviting a distant cousin. I nearly choked on my wine. "James? My ex-James? Why would we do that?" Ethan shrugged, his expression unreadable. "We run in the same circles professionally now. His firm and mine are collaborating on the West Side project. It would be awkward not to invite him, especially since he's been so civil about everything." What Ethan didn't know was that James and I hadn't spoken since our breakup. Any civility he perceived was simply James avoiding confrontation in professional settings. I'd seen James once at an industry event about 6 months after our breakup, and he'd simply nodded in acknowledgement before moving to the opposite side of the room. I'd told myself he was still hurt, still pining for me, and the thought had given me a shameful satisfaction. But I didn't correct Ethan's assumption. Instead, I found myself nodding, rationalizing that it would show how mature and moved on we all were. Perhaps a part of me wanted to show James what he'd lost, to see his face when I walked down the aisle toward a man more successful, more exciting than him. "If you think it's best," I said finally, trying to sound nonchalant, while my heart pounded at the thought of seeing James again in such a context. The invitation went out, a cream-colored card with gold foil lettering, addressed to James Mitchell and guest, and to my surprise, 2 weeks later, James RSVP'd yes, just him, no plus one. I told myself it was a good sign, that he had healed and moved on just as I had. What I didn't expect was the email I received a week before the wedding. "I'd like to give a toast at your reception," it read, "to honor our past and celebrate your future. Let me know if that would be acceptable." I was floored. It seemed like such a mature, generous offer. It also, if I'm being completely honest, stroked my ego. The idea that my ex would want to stand up and wish me well with my new husband felt like validation that I'd done the right thing by leaving him, that his life was better now too, that he had accepted his role in the background of my story. So I said yes. I didn't consult Ethan. I didn't think about what James might actually say. I didn't consider that there might be more to this request than what appeared on the surface. I just said yes and added him to the toast list, telling myself it would be a beautiful moment of closure for everyone. The wedding day arrived and everything was perfect. The weather was impeccable, sunny but not too hot, with just enough of a breeze to make the air feel fresh. The ceremony went flawlessly, with me in my custom-designed gown that had cost more than my first car, Ethan looking handsome and confident in his designer tux. The reception was elegant, the champagne flowing, the band playing all our favorite songs. I felt like the princess I'd always dreamed of being, the center of attention in a day meticulously crafted to showcase the perfect couple we appeared to be. When it came time for the toasts, my father went first, his voice cracking with emotion as he talked about watching his little girl grow up. My maid of honor followed, sharing sweet anecdotes about our friendship and her instant approval of Ethan when I'd first introduced them. Then Ethan's best man delivered a toast full of inside jokes and sincere wishes for our happiness. Their words were warm, loving, filled with hope for our future. And then it was James's turn. He looked different as he stood up, more confident than I remembered. He'd filled out, his shoulders broader, his stance more assured. He'd grown a short, well-maintained beard that suited him, and his previously shaggy hair was now styled in a way that emphasized his strong jawline. He wore an impeccably tailored suit, and for a moment I felt a strange pang of something I couldn't quite identify. Regret? Nostalgia? Attraction? I pushed the feeling away, gripping Ethan's hand tighter under the table. James tapped his glass gently, and the room fell silent. His smile was warm as he looked around, nodding at familiar faces. But when his eyes met mine, there was a flicker of something, cool and deliberate, that made me shift uncomfortably in my seat. "For those who don't know me," he began, his voice calm and steady, "I'm James. Jessica and I were together for 6 years before she found her happiness with Ethan." He paused, giving the room a moment to settle. "I was asked why I'd want to give a toast at my ex's wedding. It's a good question." A few polite chuckles drifted through the crowd, though the atmosphere remained tense. The truth is, I thought about it a lot. After all, it's not every day you get an invite to the wedding of the person who cheated on you. A stunned silence fell over the room. My stomach dropped. Ethan's hand twitched in mine. James didn't flinch. But I wanted to give a toast, not out of bitterness, but because I believe every chapter, no matter how painful, deserves its ending, and I wanted to be the one to write mine. His gaze flicked to Ethan. "I don't have any ill will toward you, man. We've crossed paths professionally, and you've always seemed decent. So here's what I'll say. Keep your eyes open. The woman you married is charming, ambitious, and magnetic, just like she was with me. She knows how to make you feel like the center of her universe, until someone more exciting walks by." I heard someone gasp nearby. My mouth went dry. "I don't say this to ruin your day," James continued, still wearing that infuriatingly polite smile, "but because I wish someone had warned me. When trust is broken once, rebuilding it takes more than just pretty words and diamond rings. It takes accountability, something I never got." He raised his glass. "To Jessica and Ethan, may your marriage be built on something real, and may you both find exactly what you're looking for. This time." He sat down slowly, to the sound of scattered, stunned applause. Conversations didn't resume right away. The silence hung like fog. My heart was pounding. I couldn't look at Ethan, whose hand had gone rigid in mine. The wedding coordinator, sensing the tension, quickly signaled for the band to start playing again, and people gradually returned to their conversations, though now they were hushed, furtive, undoubtedly discussing what they'd just witnessed. I finally found the courage to look at Ethan. His face had drained of color, his jaw clenched tight. Without looking at me, he stood up abruptly and walked toward the exit. I followed, heart hammering against my ribs, leaving confused and uncomfortable guests staring after us. I caught up to him in the hallway outside the reception room. "Ethan, please, I can explain." He whirled around, his eyes cold with a fury I'd never seen before. "Explain what, Jessica? How you've been lying to me from the beginning? How our entire relationship is built on a foundation of deception?" "It wasn't like that," I pleaded, reaching for his arm. He jerked away as if my touch would burn him. Was he telling the truth? Did you cheat on him with me? His voice was dangerously quiet. The lie rose automatically to my lips, but died there when I saw the look in his eyes. He already knew the answer. "Yes," I whispered, "but it's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple," he cut me off. "You lied. You lied to him, and you've been lying to me. Was anything about us ever real?" My silence was enough. Ethan ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, messing it up in a way that seemed to symbolize the unraveling of everything we'd built. "The wedding's over, Jessica. We're over." "You can't mean that," I said, panic rising. "We just got married. We can work through this. We can get counseling, take time." "No," he interrupted, his voice suddenly calm, almost detached. "I'm not going to waste another day on someone who could betray the person they claim to love. I'm filing for an annulment as soon as possible." "Ethan, please." "I'm going to go back in there," he said, straightening his tie with shaking hands, "and tell everyone that the reception is ending early due to unforeseen circumstances. I suggest you find somewhere else to stay tonight. I don't want to see you when I get home." With that, he turned and walked back into the reception, leaving me standing alone in the hallway, still in my wedding dress, my makeup starting to run with silent tears. I couldn't face everyone. I couldn't bear to see the judgment in their eyes, the whispers behind earshot, the pity from those who had warned me that Ethan was too good for me. I slipped out a side door and called an Uber, giving the driver the address of a hotel downtown. The ride to the hotel was excruciating. The driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, clearly wondering why a bride in full wedding attire was alone, crying in his back seat. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur through my tears, feeling my life collapsing around me. At the hotel, the receptionist's eyes widened when I walked in, still in my wedding dress, asking for a room. Her pity was almost worse than judgment would have been. She gave me a sympathetic smile as she handed over the key card. I spent my wedding night alone in that sterile hotel room, still in my wedding dress because I had no other clothes, sobbing until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. I kept checking my phone, hoping Ethan would call, that he'd calm down and realize we could work through this. But the only messages were from concerned friends and family, asking where I'd gone, what had happened, if I was okay. I couldn't bring myself to answer any of them. What could I say? That my ex had exposed me as a cheater at my own wedding? That my new husband had immediately rejected me? That the perfect life I'd constructed was built on lies that had finally caught up with me? The next morning, I returned to our apartment to find Ethan had already packed a suitcase and left. There was a note on the kitchen counter. I've contacted a lawyer about the annulment. I'll be staying at David's until we sort this out. Please have your things moved out by the end of the week. Just like that, my marriage was over before it had truly begun. The dream life I thought I'd secured crumbled in a matter of hours, all because of choices I'd made years ago, choices I'd never fully owned up to. The weeks that followed were a blur of humiliation and loss. The annulment proceedings moved quickly. Ethan cited fraud as the grounds, arguing that I had fundamentally misrepresented myself and the nature of our relationship. I couldn't refute it because it was true. I had lied, by omission if not directly, about how my relationship with James had ended. I had allowed Ethan to believe a version of me that wasn't real. I tried to call Ethan multiple times during those first few weeks, desperate to explain, to apologize, to somehow salvage something from the wreckage. But he either didn't answer or kept our conversations brief and coldly practical, focused only on the logistics of separating our lives. Did you know? I asked him during one of these conversations. Before the wedding, did you know about me and James? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I had suspicions, he finally admitted. Things you said that didn't quite add up. But I convinced myself I was being paranoid. I wanted to believe you were better than that. His disappointment cut deeper than anger would have. I'm sorry, I whispered, knowing how inadequate the words were. So am I, he replied, his voice tired. But it's better this way. Better to know now than years down the road, maybe with kids involved. He was right, of course, but that didn't make it hurt any less. My parents were devastated. They had spent a small fortune on a wedding that had imploded spectacularly, and now they had to face questions from family and friends about what had happened. My mother, always concerned with appearances, could barely look at me. My father was more sympathetic, but even he seemed bewildered by the person I had become. I didn't raise you to be this way, Jess, he said during one painful conversation. To lie, to cheat. What happened to the little girl who used to cry when she accidentally stepped on an ant? I had no answer for him. I didn't know when or how I'd become capable of such calculated deceit. All I knew was that I was paying for it now, with interest. The social fallout was even worse. Our joint friends predictably took Ethan's side. He was the wronged party, after all. I received a few tentative messages asking if I was okay, but they felt perfunctory, obligatory. The invitations to brunches, happy hours, and dinner parties dried up. My Instagram followers dropped by the hundreds as people distanced themselves from the drama. A video clip of James's toast had somehow made its way onto social media, and though it was quickly taken down, the damage was done. I had become a cautionary tale, a punchline. Update. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and I want to thank everyone for their responses, even the harsh ones. You've all given me a lot to think about, and while many of your comments were difficult to read, I needed to hear them. Things with Ethan have gone from bad to worse. 3 days after I posted here, he told me the annulment was complete. He didn't want to marry on a foundation of lies, and after thinking about it, he doesn't believe I've really changed from the person who cheated on James. Work became my only refuge, though even there I could feel the subtle shift in how people treated me. The whispers that followed me down the hallway, the way conversations would stop when I entered a meeting room. My boss called me into his office a week after the wedding disaster. Look, Jessica, he said, I don't care about your personal life, but when it starts affecting your work performance and team morale, it becomes my concern. I nodded, numb. I understand. I'm doing my best. Your best isn't good enough right now, he replied. He told me it wasn't personal, but he had to let me go. So now not only did my marriage end before it even started, I was now also jobless. The loneliness was crushing. I'd moved into a sterile studio apartment, surrounded by boxes I couldn't bring myself to unpack. Each night, I'd lie awake replaying James's toast in my mind, seeing the shock on Ethan's face, feeling the foundation of my life crumble all over again. I'd always prided myself on being strong, independent, in control of my life. Now I felt adrift, exposed, vulnerable in ways I'd never experienced. If there's anything I've learned from this mess, it's that running from yourself never works. The person you're trying to escape always catches up eventually. Thanks, Reddit. Goodbye.